Hi there, it's Lisa with Lisa's Creative Corner. Today I'm going to show you how you can create flowers and leaves even if you don't have a flower or a leaf die. I created this little treat box, and the flowers here and the leaves here were actually created using products that didn't include flowers or leaves. I'm going to be using these little pinwheel dies from the Round We Go bundle, but you can use any circular shape that you have. You can use actually plain circles or any circles that have little edges like these do. For each of the flowers that I made for my box, I cut 4 pinwheels. I cut 2 of the larger ones and 2 of these smaller ones. Then I took the coordinating ink pad, and in this case I'm using Strawberry Slush, and I used a sponge dauber to add a little bit of color to the tips. It's very subtle, but when you adhere the layers together, it gives it a little bit more dimension. Now I didn't do this step on the white flower, but if I wanted to, I could have added a light gray or even a very subtle yellow to the tips. And for the smallest flower on my box, I used Pretty in Pink cardstock and added a little bit of Pretty in Pink ink to the edges. The next step is to adhere the layers together. I'm using my Take Your Pick tool with this craft tip end, and I'm adhering them together with mini dimensionals in between each layer. So you can see here I'm starting with the largest pinwheel die cut, and then I'm putting the smaller one on top. Then I'll be adding another larger one, and then the last layer is going to be another one of the smaller ones. And you can see I'm sort of curling out the outer parts of the flower and then holding the middle with my finger so that it kind of bends out and curls at the tips. And you can use your fingers like I've been doing here, or you can even use the tip of the Take Your Pick tool to make it even easier. You can do this in between each layer like I've been doing, or if you want to wait until you have all of your layers put together, you can do it at that point. It just gives you a little bit more dimension, I think, by doing it this way. And then, of course, depending on what type of shape you're working with and how detailed the little points are, you might want to wait till the very end because it might be too delicate to do it layer by layer. Or if you just have circles, you're probably going to want to crumple them up really well before you adhere the layers together. So now that the base of the flower is done, now we need to figure out what to put in the center. So I'm going to be using my fine tip glue pen to add a nice little dollop of adhesive right in the center so that I can put my loose frosted dots in the center. This is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use a whole bunch of the little dots and create sort of like a cluster. So the loose frosted dots that I'm going to be using here, they're not self-adhesive. That's why I wanted to add some glue first. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the Take Your Pick tool to pull out some of the pink dots. And they come in 3 different sizes. So I'm going to start off by adding one of the larger ones in the center, and then I'm going to use some of the smaller ones around it. And I'm just going to keep piling them on until I have, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 in the middle, and then I'm going to use the tip of my Take Your Pick tool to kind of slide them around and kind of bunch them up in the center. And then at the very end I'm going to add just a little bit more glue to kind of hold everything in place, and then I'm going to set this aside to dry because this glue will take a little bit of time to dry. Now, if you don't have any loose gems or dots like I'm using here, you can use just about anything in the center of these flowers. You can use one large embellishment if you have one, or you can die cut a little circle just out of cardstock and put that in the center. You can use enamel effects or liquid pearls or even some stickles in the center. Now while we set this aside to dry, we're going to go ahead and make the leaves. So I'm taking a piece of granny apple cardstock and I'm scoring it in the center. I'm going to use my bone folder to burnish it on both sides so I get a nice crisp crease. And then we're going to place it on the inside of the Mini Corrugated embossing folder. While the cardstock is still folded, we're going to place it at an angle inside of the folder. You can put it at either angle. You can put it diagonal, about 45 degrees either on the left or the right. It really doesn't matter. And then you're going to run it through your embossing machine. And once you open it up, you'll see it gives you a really nice sort of chevron pattern. Now while the cardstock is still folded and you have the crease on the left side, you're going to go ahead and take your scissors and cut a half leaf shape. And you want to do as many as you can out of the piece of cardstock that you've used, making sure that the size of your leaves is appropriate for the size of the flowers that you've created. The nice thing is that you can cut your leaves any size you want. Now if you don't have an embossing folder like this one, all you need to do is crumple up the cardstock, fold it in half, and cut it just like I did here. I love the effect you get when you use the corrugated embossing folder, but you can get a really cool effect just by crumpling up the cardstock as well. The next thing we're going to do to add a little more texture is to add a little bit of the Granny Apple Green ink. And I'm just using a sponge dauber kind of like we did on the edges of the flowers, and I'm just adding a little bit of ink to the edges and the tops of the leaves. And you'll notice the areas that are embossed take the ink a little bit more than the other areas, so it just gives it a little bit more dimension. And once the ink dries, it'll be a little more subtle and won't be so dark. The center of the flowers should be dry by now, so now all we have to do is attach the flowers and the leaves to our box. If you're curious, the box is actually a book treat box from Stampin' Up, and I covered it with some Country Woods Designer Series paper. And I will put a link down below to each of the products that I've used for the box and the flowers and the leaves. I also wanted to mention the Time to Celebrate sentiment came from the Round We Go stamp set that is included in the bundle. To create the smaller flower, all I did was die cut some pretty and pink cardstock with the same dies and then used my scissors to trim them to make them a little bit smaller before I put them together. I hope I've inspired you to create some flowers and leaves with the products you have on hand. I'd love to see what you create, so be sure to leave a comment down below with a link to your projects. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye!